door, don't be too surprised when he opens the door. So don't slam it. Use it as an opportunity for outreach. You don't have to compromise anything to do that, but it's just wonderful to have communication on a decent, friendly basis with people with whom you share daily life, business life, and other social life, sports, all the things that are out there. I do want us tonight to look into the 11th chapter of John, and there's no way to cover it in any great detail. I do know about the time, and I will watch it closely. But I think it's terribly important to see context in order to understand text. And Tom Holland's favorite expression with us when we were in classes at Freed Hardeman, any text taken out of context becomes a pretext. So if you lift something out of the text that is not intended in the original understanding of it, you're on dangerous territory. You can prove anything with the Bible. And you've heard the examples, I've heard them too, where Judas went out and hanged himself and Jesus said, go and do thou likewise. And that's not the same text, but it is in the Bible. So if you want to misuse the text, you can make it say anything you want to. And that's not fair. I've written letters where people quoted part of it and then later lifted a quote out and had me saying something that I did not say. That's not honest. Let's be honest with the text. What we have in John chapter 11, and as you look at the closing verses of chapter 10, you're going to see where this is right before the time of the raising of Lazarus, and then in chapter 12 where the people are coming to see Lazarus now that he's back. But in chapter 10 we know that Jesus and his disciples are on the other side of Jordan, on the east side of the Jordan River. And they are there because the threat on Jesus' life has become known. The Jews were very upset at the raising of Lazarus because there were many people who were following Jesus or wanting to know more. He created quite a stir when that happened. And so they went to Caiaphas, the high priest, and said, we've got to do something. And he said it would be better for him to die, one to die, than for all of us to lose what we have. And so there was something of an organized plot to kill Jesus. And he knew it, and the disciples knew it too. So they are now away from Bethany, away from Jerusalem, just across on the other side of the Jordan River, which would be east of Jerusalem and Bethany and so forth. Now, during that time, we find in the early verses of chapter 11 that word is received from Mary and Martha, he whom you love is sick. Now, knowing Jesus as you do and I do, that wouldn't be very definitive, would it? He loved everybody. But there was something special about his relationship with Mary and Martha and Lazarus. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not elitism. It's not favoritism or cliquishness. If you don't believe that, go look at your Christmas list. I'm not on it. Not a one of you sends me a Christmas present. So what? I don't send you one either. But I do send them to certain people in the family and certain people for whatever reason. It's not wrong to have closer friends. You do, I do, Jesus did. The Apostle John referred to himself as that disciple whom Jesus loved. That doesn't mean he didn't love Bartholomew. It just means that there was a special closeness, especially since John's doing the writing. He gets to call himself whatever he wants to. Now, here, Lazarus is a special friend of Jesus. And he's sick. And they send word to him, but he stays 2 days without doing anything with that. And then he tells his disciples, let's go. Lazarus is asleep, and we'll go wake him up. Now, they say, if he's asleep and he's sick, he'll feel better when he wakes up. Let's don't disturb him. But Jesus then said, Lazarus is dead. And notice that he meant the same thing by both expressions. Lazarus is asleep, Lazarus is dead, and Jesus therefore uses the symbol of being asleep to represent something about death. We're not talking about soul sleeping. We're not talking about anything that's out of character for Jesus. But he is saying death can be compared to sleep. Now, for you and me, that's fine. Let's don't say that to our children, little children especially. Now, Grandma went to sleep, and so she never did come back. And so the child is afraid to go to bed that night because he might go to sleep and never wake up. So we can do the symbolism without any problems when we've been around a while and had some experience. Jesus said Lazarus is dead, and he meant by that in that sleep term, his body has separated from his spirit. Now, we need to know that people who live die. Everybody does. Hebrews 9:27 is appointed a man wants to die, and after this the judgment. Everybody is. I was with a lady the other day when she received her diagnosis. The doctor said, "I'm sorry to tell you it is terminal." And her response to me, when she was telling me about it, it was really interesting. Not funny, but it was interesting. She said, "I've known all my life I was terminal. He didn't tell me a thing I didn't know." Well, obviously what he meant was it's probably quicker than you thought, or it's quicker than it will be for some other people, because the diagnosis, and this is speaking as a medical doctor to her, you probably won't live very long. She said, "Do I have as much as 6 months, do you think?" He said, "I doubt if you have that long." She said, "Well, then I need to contact hospice, because they'll take you if you have as little as 6 months prognosis." She's just as factual as she can be about it. She no more dreads dying and going to be with the Lord than I would dread going to be with my family at a picnic. She is thinking maturely. Now, she may come to a point where she's not quite as eager about this, and she may go through the stages that Kubler-Ross talked about with denial and anger and bargaining and depression and acceptance. She may go through some of that or all of that. But right now, she's doing fine with it. And I'm happy to be with her during it. She's already telling me what she wants me to say at her funeral. And it's not a difficult thing for her. Most of us are not wired that way. We have to go through some stages, or at least some dealing with it. But let's understand it is a sleep from which we will be awakened. That is, there will be a resurrection. And the bodies that we have now will be changed. They won't be this kind of body that gets sick and dies. There will be new bodies. And it's going to be good because the Lord's in charge of it. I don't have to grasp it all. I just have to trust the one who does. So, death is asleep. In verses 15, 26, 27, 40, and 42 to 45, Jesus talks about the subject of faith. And so death is a time for us to have our faith increased. Be sure that you don't miss the opportunity to have a greater faith when there's a death being discussed. It may be yours, it may be a family member of yours, anybody, everybody. Because it's a time to call on the faith that we already have. And it's a time to implement that faith and have it strengthened rather than weakened. As human beings, we go through those times when we don't have as much faith as we thought we did. We're upset, we're disappointed, we had plans. It's hard to deal with. I know it is. I wouldn't take it lightly at all. But it's a time to build faith rather than to have your faith destroyed. Both my brothers were career Air Force. And they spent, one of them was a pilot in the Air Force, and the other was in radar and so forth. Both of them retired as full colonels. I didn't mind paying my taxes so much because they were getting a fortune out of it, and they deserved every bit of it. I'm happy for them. But my brother Kenneth, who is living now in San Antonio, he was a pilot, and he said that when he was stationed wherever, they would fly over perhaps the Pacific Ocean, part of it, or fly over somewhere in the desert, and they would have one bombing mission after another when they didn't really drop any bomb. But they were practicing maneuvers. They were doing everything they could do to be ready in case the time came that they needed to do that. He ended up being the one in Desert Storm who was in charge of all the refueling missions over all the countries that wouldn't allow us to fly over their airspace. We had to go this way, that way, and the other way to make the mission, and that took a lot of refueling from the KC-135 that he at one time flew. But what they were doing was practicing for the real event. You don't want to On another level that we can all understand easily, imagine going to a football game at Murray State, and just before the game, the coach gets a handheld mic, and he's going throughout saying, "Who would like to play football today? We need some volunteers." That's not the way they do that. They work and work and work and work and work and work and work, and then the time of the game comes, they're ready. Hopefully it'll be a better season this year than it has been for a while. But we're the home of Ja Morant. What do we care about football? We've got basketball. But the point is, you do the work, you study, you practice and keep practicing. Well, that's where we need our faith. We need to build our faith when we're not challenged, so that when we are challenged, we have a faith that we can rely on. All of us need to be building faith. Remember Romans 10:17, faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. You say, well, I'm not sure I really want to go to church next Sunday. I might go to church, but I don't want to go to class. Go ahead to class, because the Bible will be studied. And it might just be that you'll pick up something that will enhance your faith, make you stronger, just a little bit stronger. And then that time of testing may come. And when there is a diagnosis of terminal, or when you're the one who is facing death, or a family member is facing death, or you're trying to grieve past the death that's already taken place so that you can make adjustments. And it's very, very hard for some people. You need faith. Don't try to build it when you need it. Build it before you need it, and then be able to bank on it and have it deepened rather than destroyed. In the third place, Jesus talked about the resurrection. He said, I'm the resurrection and the life. He that believes in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live, and whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. And then he said to the grieving sister, do you believe this? And she said, yes, Lord, I believe that you're the Christ, the Son of the living God, who should come into the world. Jesus said, your brother will rise again. She said, I know he'll rise in the resurrection. And that's when Jesus said, I am the resurrection. So not only are we talking about deepening faith in the Lord, we're talking about the resurrection that's going to take place. I don't understand all about it. I don't have to understand all about it. I have put my 100% confidence in the Lord who does understand all about it. He has been through it, and he is the one who promises us that we will be raised from the dead. What about the person who is buried at sea? And what about the person who died in a fire? What about the person who chooses cremation? Is the Lord going to be able to raise the dead? He's going to raise the dead. Trust him and don't worry about all those other things. Trust him, because he is the resurrection and the life. You're not going to be dead to the point that you will never live again. You're going to live physically. You and I are going to stop living physically someday, but we will live forever. If the Lord comes while we're still alive, we'll be changed, but we'll have new bodies. If the Lord comes after we have died and we've been buried, then we'll be resurrected and changed. It'll be in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye at the last trumpet. It's not going to be a problem if you were or were not embalmed. It is just not going to be a problem. It's in good hands. And keep that in your minds always. Resurrection is a true Bible doctrine. Jesus groaned in the Spirit, the King James Version says. You remember the shortest verse in the English Bible? Most everybody knows what it is. You're running in for Sunday school and you haven't memorized your verse for the week. It's always John 11:35, Jesus wept. Well, you might think that's the shortest verse in the Bible. It's not. It's the shortest verse in the English Bible. 1 Thessalonians 5:16 is 2 letters shorter in the Greek. Just a little trivia. Doesn't make any difference. But we have it, rejoice evermore, which is longer than Jesus wept. But the original is actually 2 letters shorter in 1 Thessalonians 5:16. So if you like to look like you're real smart sometime, pull that on somebody. They'll think you're a smart aleck probably. Doesn't matter. But the point is, Jesus wept, and that's not just a short verse. It's not just a snappy thing to remember. It is a verse filled with the compassion of the Lord. Now, is he compassionate with Mary and Martha? Yes, he is. But I've come to the conclusion, and you can differ with me if you want to, or you can supplement what I believe about it. I believe he is sorrowful for Lazarus. The poor guy has already gone through death. He's been sick, no telling how much he's suffered, and now he's fine. He's gone to the other side. His troubles are over. And now he calls him back to do it again. The poor guy died twice. It just doesn't seem fair. And maybe Jesus weeps because the sisters are grieving. Maybe Jesus weeps because poor Lazarus is going to do some grieving now. He thought he was finished with it. Regardless of what it is, he is demonstrating compassion. Does Jesus care when I've said goodbye to the dearest on earth to me and my sad heart aches till it nearly breaks? Is it aught to him? Does he see? And each time in Frank Graff's song we answer, oh yes, he cares. I know he cares. His heart is touched with my grief. When the days are weary, the long nights dreary, I know my Savior cares. It's a beautiful thought. 1 Peter 5:7, cast all your cares on him, for he cares for you. He really does care for you. And so Jesus wept. The next thing is they came to the tomb. In verse 39, Jesus said, take away the stone. Now, just drive a peg, if you would, right there, because I want to come back to that one in a minute. In John 11:20, there are different reactions on the part of the people. Drive a peg right there, and I want to come back to that one too. I told you I was going to watch the time, and I am. John 11:21 and 32, the sisters come. Now, Mary is still in the house, and Martha has come out to meet Jesus when he comes over. And she says, Lord, if you'd been here, our brother would have died. People. And then when you're feeling better about this and you've worked through this, we'll talk again. She said, okay, does that mean you're going to leave? I said, yeah, I'll leave if you want me to. She said, well, I want you to leave. I said, okay. I'll see you later. She said, whatever. So I called her daughter and told her what was going on. She said, oh, that's Mama. And we'll just have to see how this turns out. Well, she got better for a good while. And by the way, she got better for a long time. She lived I don't know, 2 years, 2.5 years after that, and had pretty good quality of life. But she called me up. She said, we need to talk. I said, well, I'd be glad. You want me to come over there, or you want me to just listen on the phone? She said, well, I want to tell you on the phone what I want to talk about, and then I want you to come over here. She said, I'm sorry for what I said to you in my hospital room. I said, that's okay. I didn't log it in as anything permanent. It's okay. I know you. I know where your faith is. And you were challenged. And you were angry. I said, you may turn out to be normal. Watch out. So I did. I went to see her, and we talked a good while, and she said, I can pray now. And she said, thank you for being patient with me. I did not want to hear a sermon. Last thing I wanted to hear was a sermon. So thank you for not rebuking me. Mary and Martha were rebuking Jesus. Have you ever read the Psalms? King David, oh me. A guy told me the other day, said if King David had had Prozac, we wouldn't have had half the Psalms. He was so depressed, he was charging God with everything. Where were you when I needed you? You're not listening to me and all that. Well, I don't pray like that. I don't talk like that to God. But I haven't been faced with some of the things that some people have been faced with either. So the reactions of people will be different, and the rebuke is normal, and it's a good time to pray. So Jesus came to the tomb of Lazarus, and he prayed. I thank thee, O Father, that thou hast heard me. I know that thou hearest me always, but because of these who stood by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. It's a good time to pray. You don't always have to lead a prayer out loud. It's okay if you do, it's okay if you don't. Some people don't want that, so it's better not to maybe, at least temporarily. But it's a good time to pray. If it's not worth praying about, it's sure not worth worrying about. So we need to take it to the Lord in prayer. In his arms he'll take and shield thee. Thou wilt find a solace there. Where? In the arms of the Lord. Don't ever get to where you can't pray. 1 Thessalonians 5:17, pray without ceasing. Always be able to pray. And keep praying and keep on praying. Not just for the sick, not just for the death of loved ones. Those are fine things to pray about, but pray about everything instead of worrying about anything. Philippians 4:6 says that. And then last, we find in John chapter 11, verses 46 through chapter 12, verse 19, that the word spread and many people became believers because of what they saw and heard in the life, death, and resurrection of Lazarus. It's a wonderful thing. Now, go back to number 5, moving the stone. Don't you know that the people who were standing there were thinking, some of them at least, if this man can raise the dead, why is he telling us to move the stone? I had just turned 11 years old in 1957, and my mother died. And the brother, I don't feel sorry for me. I never had her. I didn't miss her because I never had her. I had a wonderful grandmother and a super dad. But my mother was emotionally ill. She could not handle life, and they didn't have the good therapy and medications and things back then. It was postpartum depression at its worst. My birth is what threw her into it. I have 2 older brothers. She had struggles with both of them, and then when I was born, that ended it. And I'm sorry, but I'm glad I didn't know it as a child, but I'm sorry it happened that way, but it did. Can't change it. You have to deal with it. But at her funeral on March the 3rd, 1957, at McAvoy Funeral Home in Paris, Tennessee, the late beloved brother Fred Chun, who was a friend of the family, sweet man if there ever was. Did you ever know him? Oh, me, what a guy. So wonderful. He was her high school principal, her high school teacher, and her preacher. He baptized her when she was a teenager, and he had known the family, and the family's known. He'd just been part of our family all along. Well, he's speaking at the funeral, and it's really hard on him. I mean, it's really tough for him. But he had a slight speech impediment, which he used to his advantage, and I just loved him to death. You would have too if you'd gotten to know him. But he said, now, when Jesus came to the tomb of Lazarus, he said, take away the stone from the door. He said, why did he say that? Don't you know that anybody who could raise the dead could move a rock? I thought, that's true. I'm barely 11. I'm not real deep in my thinking. Still not. But I sure wasn't then. He said, don't you know that anybody who could raise the dead move a rock? Why is he telling them to move the rock? It's because they could do that. They put it there. And what he's saying is, do what you can do. And then you turn it over to me, I'll do what you can't do. That's exactly the principle that we operate on today, isn't it? I can't do everything, but I can do something. You can't do everything, but you can do something. Maybe if you and I will not compete with each other, but be supplementary to each other, then we combine what you with what I can do, and the central principle is the sum total of that work when combined will be far better than the sum total of the individual works when we all go solo. That's what fellowship is about. And Jesus is saying, you move the stone, I'll raise the dead. They moved the stone. He didn't have to stone, but he could have moved himself. Miraculous, but he didn't. He said, you move the stone, I'll raise the dead. He said, Lazarus, come forth. And sure enough, he who's dead came forth bound in grave's clothes. And Jesus said, loose him, let him go. Beautiful story. You do what you can do, turn it over, and he'll do what you can't do. Next, number 6, many extend comfort by coming to be with the family, be with the bereaved. And it's a difficult time. It's hard to know what to say the time of a death. It's hard to know. Do you just want to say the same platitudes that you heard? Do you want to say something profound that can be remembered forever? Or do you just want to be present? And that says it all. Several years ago, I was preaching in a meeting down in Tennessee. And somebody from Murray had a family member to die in that town. And it was the funeral was going to be on Sunday afternoon, and I preached that morning and that night, so I had the afternoon open. And so I decided I would go by the funeral home an hour before the funeral, speak to the family, especially the person that I knew. No ties with churches at all. But just to go by and speak to them. And so